Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Hello, can everyone hear us? Oh, okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Apologies for that. We were actually talking, it seems, into a complete void there and no one could hear us, so I apologise for that. Hello from British Council in Washington, D.C. Apologies for being a few minutes late in starting, but we'll restart our webinar. So, shall we go back to the first slide? We'll just go back to the first slide. Okay, welcome again to the Global Innovation Initiative, or GII webinar. I'm Alison Corbett, Education Programme Manager for the British Council USA. I'm managing GII for the UK.
And I'm Stephanie Blackinger, the Education Communications Coordinator for the British Council in Washington, D.C. I'm working closely with Alison on the Global Innovation Initiative. The purpose of this webinar is to address any questions you may have in submitting an application for a grant. There will be a short presentation from the British Council and our special guest from the Higher Education International Unit, Dan Shaw. The majority of time will be used to answer your questions. If you have any questions, please type them into the messaging box as everyone will be muted for the webinar. The webinar should last no more than 1 hour.
Okay, so a little background. GII is a higher education partnership grant opportunity aimed at strengthening multilateral research collaborations between universities in the UK, US and designated countries including Brazil, China, India and Indonesia. It's funded by the British Council, the UK Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, BIS, and the US Department of State. GII will award grants of up to £150,000 in the UK for higher education research partnerships focused on STEM-related issues of global significance. The origin of GII can be traced back to the 2009 report, Higher Education and Collaboration in a Global Context, Building a Global Civil Society, which was co-authored by the UK-US study group led by Professor Sir Rick Traynor, currently Principal of King's College London, and former President of Universities UK, and John Sexton, current President of New York University. GII is the result of more than 5 years of collaboration between the UK and the US to create a new model for transatlantic and global cooperation. An advisory board was established comprising UK and US representatives from the HE sector. For example, the UK Higher Education International Unit and Research Councils UK are represented on that board. The board set the themes for this year's competition and provided valuable input which informed the guidelines for the call for proposals. The British Council is administering the UK competition and working closely with the US implementing agency, the Institute of International Education, which is administering the US competition. There are 2 parallel competitions which we're aligning as closely as possible. Now I'm delighted to introduce Dan Shaw, Assistant Director of Policy from the International Unit, to say a few words. Dan?
Thank you for the introduction, Alison, and hello from London. I will say a few words about the International Unit and about the UK-US higher education relationship, and a few words about what the GII means, the UK collaboration, both with the United States and the third partner countries included in the initiative. For those of you who are not familiar, the UK Higher Education International Unit is the representative body for all UK higher education institutions in their international activities. And together with the British Council, we have been closely involved in the development of the GII since those first high-level policy discussions between Vice-Chancellors and Presidents all the way back in 2009. And we're delighted that the initiative has made its way all the way from the drawing board to reality, which is especially significant at a time of fiscal restraint on the part of both the US and the United Kingdom. And I think there are a number of reasons why. One of them is the scale and importance of the UK-US relationship in higher education, research and innovation. The strength of this is unmatched. The higher education relationship between the two is worth well over $1 billion a year. US and UK academics cite each other's work more than that of any other country, with over 85,000 collaborative articles involving a UK and a US contributor published between 2007 and 2011. Between us, the US and the UK produce about 30% of the world's research articles, and about 40% of the world's research investment comes from these two countries. And yet, when you look at the top 1% most highly cited articles, they account for about 70% of the world's share. And in terms of mobility between the countries and students, the UK and the US remain each other's destination of choice for study abroad opportunities. I'm sure that everyone listening will be aware that international collaborative research is linked to higher quality outputs, and along with that, greater citation impact. But just, if not more importantly, international collaboration builds relationships between universities, between research teams, and between early career researchers that can be sustained beyond the duration of any single project and lay the foundations for further collaboration. And the focus areas for the Global Innovation Initiative applications are those global STEM-led challenges which demand a multilateral approach. Issues like sustainability, food security and urbanization, which are areas in which the UK and US universities have world-leading research expertise that, in a sense, we are obliged to share with the world to address these world-scale challenges. And in terms of what makes this initiative distinctive and what makes it particularly valuable to the UK higher education sector, the emphasis on working with our US counterparts to develop trilateral cooperation is really what sets it apart from other initiatives. Not only will the GII give new impetus to the UK-US relationship, which has been so strong for many decades, but it will increase UK and US university collaboration with the crucial third countries already involved: China, Brazil, India, and Indonesia. With the rise of these new emerging academic powers, and with the diversification of global research centres and research influence, it's more important than ever that UK universities are closely engaged. And this distinctive combination of elements, a worldwide scope, a multilateral approach, and a focus on key issues of global significance, is what makes the initiative truly innovative, and it's why the International Unit considers it so important that UK researchers are well informed about the programme and supported in their applications. I'll now hand you over to Alison for a closer look at the details of the application process itself. Over to you, Alison.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay. The goals for the Global Innovation Initiative are highlighted on this slide. We really see GII as seed grant funding to help strengthen institutional research capacity for all partners involved.
Okay, and as we've mentioned before, and Dan mentioned, thank you, Dan, the themes, the 4 areas that we are prioritising in this grant competition are energy, environment and climate change, agriculture, food security and water, global health and well-being, and urbanisation.
Proposals led by a UK institution should apply through the UK stream. US-led proposals should be submitted via the Institute of International Education. The UK application is web-based. All attachments must be ready to attach when you fill out the online application. So, for example, the letters of commitment, the CVs, they should all be prepared prior to filling out the application. Attachments must be in Word, Excel, or PDF formats as appropriate. The online application may be found on the British Council's IHE website and clicking on Submit Your Application at the bottom of the page. The deadline for applications is Monday, 16th December at 9 a.m.
Right, before we begin answering your specific questions, we would like to share some of the frequently asked questions that we've been receiving. What are the partnership requirements? The minimum requirement for a partnership is that there must be at least one higher education institution from the UK and the US and at least one of the selected third countries, Brazil, China, India or Indonesia. Beyond that basic requirement, multiple higher education institutions from one country may be involved in a partnership, and there may also be additional countries, not just the designated countries, involved in the partnership. Can an institution submit multiple proposals? Yes, institutions can submit multiple distinct proposals. However, the same or similar proposals that are submitted through both the UK and US streams will be deemed ineligible. Does my research topic fit under a specific theme? Regarding the proposal topic, the definitions of academic areas of priority will be interpreted broadly in the selection process. What are the restrictions on human testing? Clinical procedures on human subjects such as drug and medical intervention trials are not eligible for funding. This is an area where we aligned with the US competition. However, we are allowing the use of existing clinical data and surveys which are not being allowed in the US competition. Is faculty staff time an acceptable cost for the budget? Costs and stipends for non-permanent staff, postdocs and research assistants are permissible. This does not include tuition fees which are not eligible for funding. We strongly encourage funding to go toward direct costs. Cost sharing for indirect and overhead costs is strongly encouraged to support institutional commitment.
We would now like to spend the rest of the webinar answering your questions. Please type your question in the messaging box and we will answer as they come in. If your question is specific to your proposal or if your question does not get answered, please email gii@britishcouncil.org following this webinar. And if you have emailed us questions, we are working on getting back to you. And we will pause briefly to allow time for questions to be submitted right now.
All right. Hello again. The questions are pouring in, so thank you so much for that. Just to let you know that we can make these slides available and also that this webinar is being recorded, so we are very happy to share that with anyone who wishes it. We've had a question about additional partners from other countries, and this is a question that we do get quite regularly. Can an institution not located in the UK, US, Brazil, China, India or Indonesia be eligible as an additional partner? Institutions located out of these countries may be considered as secondary or additional partners. However, the majority of activities should be conducted within the UK or preferably in the designated country. Okay, we've also had a question about letters of commitment. Letters of commitment must be submitted by all primary partners to show institutional commitment. At the minimum, there must be a letter of commitment from the UK, US and third country higher education institution. Letters from secondary or additional partners are not mandatory but are highly recommended to show their commitment and importance to the partnership. Letters of commitment should come from a senior administration official that is authorised to make institutional commitments for partnerships, for example, perhaps your PVC.
Can you do interviews for human testing?
Oh yeah, we've been asked if you can do interviews under the human testing under the global health and well-being theme, and yes, you can do that. That is eligible. Okay. We've been asked about cost sharing. What is the expected level of institutional cost sharing or match funding contribution? There is no minimum or maximum level of commitment. However, the higher the cost share, the more competitive the proposal, and it is a factor that will be looked at by the evaluation committees. Cost sharing should be shared equally amongst partner institutions if that is possible. To clarify what we were just saying about cost sharing on overhead costs, and what we say is that we would expect to fund direct costs. If there are overhead costs, we would encourage those to be part of an institution's cost share, but that doesn't mean that in the budget template you can't include indirect costs or overheads, but it probably wouldn't be quite as competitive to do that. Yes, activities can be held in any of the partner countries. We've had a question about where they can be held, but we would encourage it strongly to be in the UK or the third country rather than the USA, and that is actually aligned with the US competition, which is encouraging in the US or the third country rather than the UK. Okay, we had a question about whether if there is an additional country partner which is not one of the three priority countries, UK, US and either Brazil, China, India or Indonesia. For example, if there was, I'll just take an example of Spain, if that was another country, activities could be held there. We'd have to see in the proposal that there was a mutual benefit to all of the other three partner countries for the activity to be held in that country. There would need to be a strong case for that, but again, we wouldn't. It wouldn't be ineligible, but there would need to be a strong case for it. We've had a question about whether you can address more than one theme in the proposal, and we do understand that some of these themes are overlapping. You can do that, but you do have to choose one primary theme that the proposal is addressing when you make the application. But yes, interdisciplinary subjects are eligible, so we do understand there is some overlap. But you do choose one primary theme.
I'm going to put that slide about the goals back up. Yes, someone else.
Okay, we're just about to put the slide about the goals back up again. Okay, we've been getting questions about the topic of the proposals. For example, would we consider food safety a subset of food security? And really the definitions of these themes and the academic areas of priority, we are interpreting them broadly in the selection process. We would ask that you make a strong argument for the applicability of this topic to the theme that you've chosen, as well as the relevance. But yes, we are looking at these themes quite broadly. And we've been asked about, did we just say that indirect costs could be part of the budget? We did, but we also clarified that by saying that it would not make for as strong a proposal, as we are not looking to fund indirect costs and overheads in this, but more funding direct costs, and we would hope that indirect and overhead costs could be part of an institution's cost share, but we're not saying that you can't put it in your budget. Yes, we had a question about third country partners are looking to visit the UK and or the US, and to what extent visits between third countries are expected. And yes, we do expect that. We do talk about mobility, faculty and student mobility in this initiative, so we would expect there to be a mobility strand. And we've been asked, is a CV required for just the principal investigator, or does the lead from each partner submit a CV? And we ask that each partner submits a CV. And one question we had, if there were any guidelines for the CVs, for example, the number of pages, etc. And we don't have any guidelines surrounding the format of the CVs. CVs are only required from the PIs, as we said, of the primary institutions. So we leave that to you. Yes, a good question about the allocation of awards equally across the priority areas. And the way that we are going to do the selection process is that we should get the best submissions from each of the 4 priority areas. So we are actually looking for a diversity of theme, as well as diversity of institutions, for this award. So would hope to have, obviously we can't tell how many applications we're going to get under each theme, but we would hope that we would have a spread across the 4 priority areas. It's been asked if this is a mobility grant. It's not primarily a mobility grant. Mobility is part of this. It is a grant to encourage either existing or seed funding for brand new higher education research partnerships, and mobility is a part of that as outlined in the proposal guidelines, but it's not purely a mobility grant. Okay. And we've had a question about the letters of support from third parties. Third-party letters of support are mandatory and may come from any organisation or institution in the private or public sector located in any country. The letter doesn't have to come from an institution located within just the partnership countries. Although there is no limit on the number of letters that can be submitted, they should only be submitted from relevant third-party organisations that can provide solid evidence of an individual's ability, experience and research capacity, or it can be a letter in support of the partnership as a whole. Okay, and a question about subsistence allowances for travelling researchers. And we would recommend that we were asked if what the British Council's standard rates are for each country, but we would recommend that you use your own university's rates for travelling. We've had a question about how narrow the definition is of the STEM subjects. And the proposal should be founded in traditional STEM, but that can also be around social sciences. We are slightly broader than purely STEM for this initiative. And we do encourage interdisciplinary proposals. We've been asked whether, for example, if a partnership includes a country which is not one of the 3 priority countries that must be in a partnership, with the UK, US and the third country, Brazil, China, India or Indonesia. For example, if it was Spain, we'll take that example again, could they receive funding? And it's up to the partnership to decide how the lead institution distributes the fund amongst primary and secondary partners. Having said that, we do encourage that the majority of activities take place in the UK or the selected third country, but the UK universities will be the ones receiving this grant, and it will be up to them to distribute as appropriate. We've been asked how many researchers within one institution, and we don't have a limit to this. There's no limit to how many researchers can be involved in the project. Okay, we've been asked a question about lab costs, if they're eligible, for example, consumables. We can include laboratory consumables. You can include, rather, laboratory consumables, costs, stipends for non-permanent staff and research assistants, and any other activity that you need to conduct the research. Another question is whether companies can be involved in a partnership, and yes, they can be. Any private sector can be involved as a secondary partner, as long as you still have the three main higher education institution partners. You can include private sector companies. Is there a limit for the number of exchange staff and students? No, we have not set a limit on that. On the letters of commitment, we don't have a model to share on that, but we do ask that the letter comes from someone within the institution who has the authority to agree to the institution being involved in the partnership. Okay, yes, we've had a question about the length of the proposal narrative. We are saying 10 double-spaced pages for this, but that doesn't include anything where you need to put in graphs or data tables. Those can be additional to that double-spaced page, 10 double-spaced pages. For how many key researcher CVs to submit, there should be at least 3, because we need the principal researchers from each of the partner institutions, but you can send additional if there are more researchers involved in the project, but there should be a minimum of 3. Question about the letters of support from third parties again. Do these parties have to offer a financial commitment, often in kind, to the project? We are not requiring that in this initiative. Question about existing or new partnerships, just to confirm that this can either be an existing partnership or a brand new partnership. Both are eligible to apply for this grant funding. Question about whether non-HE partners are allowed. Again, this would come under secondary partners. We would allow them to be secondary partners but not primary partners, as we do need to have 3 accredited higher education institutions as the primary partners for the initiative. Is the time of permanent can the time of permanent staff be shown as a cost sharing? Yes, absolutely. That can be shown as a cost share. Is there a recommended limit to the number of partners? In addition to the 3 required partners, we have not put a limit on any additional either higher education institutions or secondary partners, but obviously the grant will not be any bigger than the 150K, so just bear that in mind if you are including a lot of additional partners. Yes, we are saying that activities should take place either in the UK or the designated third country, Brazil, China, India or Indonesia. That doesn't mean activities cannot take place in the US, but we encourage them to be in the UK or the third country. And this is to align with the US competition, which is requiring that activities take place either in the US or the third country in their request for proposals. So, as I say, we're not saying you cannot have activities in the US, but we encourage them to be in the UK or the third country. Again, a question about whether costs are permissible for countries outside of the partnership countries, the designated third countries. Yes, as I said earlier, that yes, that is possible. The UK institution will receive this grant and they will be the ones who will distribute in the partnership. But there would need to be a strong case for that country being involved in the partnership and to show that it was contributing to the benefit of the 3 primary countries involved. Yes, there will be approximately 10 projects funded in the UK side and 10 on the US side, so 20 in total for the initiative. And as I mentioned earlier, we plan to, the way that we're doing the selection process, there will be 4 panels of experts under those themes who will evaluate the best of the submissions under those themes so that the best will rise to the top and before a final selection committee. And so we would expect that all 4 of the themes will be well represented in the final selection. This is assuming we get an equal number, or more or less equal number of applications, of course, in each of those themes, which we can't obviously predict at the moment. I had a question about whether we're providing funding for temporary staff's time to collect data under field activity budget, and yes, that is an allowable budget line. So yes, we can allow for costs of research, data collection staff, temporary staff. The question about if there's more than one researcher from the US or the UK, do they need to provide a CV for each researcher? We need a CV for each of the principal investigators, principal researchers from each institution, and we do not require a CV from additional researchers, but you are welcome to include them. There will be a total of 20 grants awarded, 10 for the US, 10 for the UK in this funding cycle. Question about whether you would have to show that the partnership will be sustained beyond the GII grant, and that's a very strong yes. We would be looking for sustainability of the grant. Okay, but a question about the equipment expected under the 5K limit, which we mention as eligible costs. Across the 4 themes, it is difficult for us to specify the kind of equipment this may include. We set a limit as the purchase of, for example, expensive laboratory equipment was not considered the purpose of this grant, which is why we set that 5K limit, but we will really leave that. We are not providing guidelines on what that 5K can be used for. We will leave that to you, and we will accept your proposal in that regard. For the proposal narrative, we're not specifying a font size, so but just be aware that people will be reading it, perhaps needing their reading glasses, so just don't make it too small, but I know you'll probably want to get as much into that 10 pages as possible. As far as where activities take place, we wouldn't say that most activities should be in the UK, but we would encourage that most of the activities take place in the UK or the third country, Brazil, China, India or Indonesia, rather than the US, but it doesn't mean that you can't have activities in the US. We are aligning with the US competition language in that regard. Can another UK university be involved as a partner? Yes, you can, as long as you have at least one UK HEI. You can have more than one if you wish. Should text in the tables also be double-spaced in the proposal? I would say not. No, just the proposal narrative, the body of the proposal narrative itself should be double-spaced, and any annexes which have graphs, tables, or anything like that don't need to be double-spaced. Okay, been asked about what group activities are and what activities we would we're thinking of. In addition to pure research collaboration, we encourage activities that promote student or faculty mobility, convening panel discussions, as well as collaboration on degrees and other approaches to learning, workshops. You're not limited to any of these suggestions, but just bear in mind that all activities should promote the STEM-related priority areas and the sustainable partnerships as well as the overall initiative. Question about how general or technical the narrative should be. It will be peer reviewed, so please do make it as technical as you wish, as the experts that we will have on our panels will be able to understand it. So certainly the first round, it's a two-tiered selection process. The first round will look very carefully at the scientific merit of the, or the academic merit of the submissions and will be peer reviewed. A question about what are the expected deliverables for final reporting. For partnerships who are awarded a grant, this will be set out very clearly in the grant agreement, the reporting requirements for partnerships. But the overall goals of the initiative are set out in the call for proposals, which are to increase global mobility of students, researcher, faculty and higher education administrators from the UK, US and the selected countries, to develop a cadre of people in the UK, US and selected countries who have international experience, outlook and knowledge to confront global challenges and operate in a global context, and so on, so on. I won't go through them all, they're all listed there in the call for proposals, but we would expect that any deliverables would tie in to the overall goals and objectives of the initiative. A question about whether there's any preference for existing over new partnerships, and no, we are welcoming brand new partnerships and existing partnerships, and we are not giving preference to one over the other. Okay, question about what is the guidance for proposed activities such as joint degrees or training programs, and what we would say is that whatever activities take place should be supporting the overall goals and objectives of the initiative. Just checking our time, as I know we are almost at noon. We can answer a few more questions. Okay, what could be the maximum duration of a project? We are giving grants for a 2-year period. Is a research institute from India, Brazil, China or Indonesia considered as an academic institute. You can include a research institute from one of those countries, but you do also have to have a higher education institution as well. So in some cases they may be affiliated with the university that you can work with, but you do also need a higher education institution. Someone is asking for clarification about activities. When we say activities should be in the UK or a third country, does this mean the mobility activities or is it the entire project activities? We would mean the entire project activities. There's a question about temporary staff being employed for the 2-year duration of the project. What we can't cover is temporary staff who are replacing permanent members of staff. But what we can cover are staff who are collecting data or doing work which is directly contributing to the partnership. Or doing field work, that kind of activity. Those salaries could be covered. A question about whether we want any cost breakdown sheet to be submitted individually for the costs. Where possible, yes, if you can do that, we would welcome that. Can more than one institution in China be involved in the initiative? And the answer is yes. Yes, for the proposal narrative, figures and data are not part of the 10 pages, so please feel free to include those as addenda. Someone says they have 3 potential partners from Brazil. And in this case, you would choose one of them to be the primary partner and the other 2 institutions could be the secondary partners. But you could have, it's permissible to have more than one partner from that country. Do you have to specify how existing partnerships were created? I think it would be good to address that at least to give a summary of how the partnership was created. Is Hong Kong included in China? Yes, we are including Hong Kong as eligible in this initiative. Can this grant fund a PhD student? The answer is no, we don't cover doctoral fees. Can we involve more than one partner from India, China, Brazil, or Indonesia? Yes, the answer is yes to that. Okay, so as we said earlier, we are focusing just on this year's competition for funding, but we will obviously share any news that we have of the continuance of the initiative. We have come to the end of our allotted time for the webinar. We've gone a bit over actually. Thank you very much to everyone who joined in the webinar, and a special thanks again to Dan Shah in London from the International Unit for contributing to this event. If your question...
Thank you, Alison.
Oh, thank you, Dan. If your question was not answered, please email us at gii@britishcouncil.org and we will get back to you. There's some questions were very specific and we would rather reply to you individually. So please do get in touch and we look forward to receiving your applications and good luck. Thank you.